confirm that we do have quorum, and I'd like to call meeting 35 of the Budget Committee to order. And I'd like to, of course, welcome everybody on a wonderfully bright, sunny Friday morning. Today's meeting is being held with members of the Budget Committee participating, actually all by video conference. City staff are also connected to the meeting by video conference. The public continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. These measures are necessary to comply with public health guidelines and to prevent the spread of COVID-19. There are no registered speakers today, but you can view online by going to toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting if you wish to speak. But again, there's no registered speakers today. I ask for patience as always if we do have any delays or technical issues. City Clerk has provided all agenda materials via the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff will be available to participants to help with your devices. Again, ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. I'll create a speakers list as per usual. If you do have any motions, I remind you that they have to be emailed into staff at the buc@toronto.ca. If there's any visiting members, I haven't seen any visiting members attending. I encourage you to turn on your video so we can see you. Although we're meeting in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of Credit. To begin, declarations of interest on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none. Thank you. I'd like to, if we can, first thing we have to adopt the motion of the minutes from the October 8th and 3rd, 2021. Somebody like to move that, Councillor Layton? I think I saw it. It probably has to pop up on the screen. If not, then Councillor Layton has moved it. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. First item, I'd like to welcome our newest member of the Budget Committee, Councillor Cynthia Lai. City Council voted you in as a member last meeting. I just wanted to welcome you here to, of course, our colleagues and to all the staff. And if you wanted to introduce yourself, by all means, Councillor, you can do that if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I'm very honored to be here sitting with my colleagues for the Budget Committee. So I look forward to working with all the members and staff. And just so you know, Mr. Chair, I have been very well briefed by staff, and I hope I'm going to be caught up. Thank you.
Well, lots of catch up to do, but I know we have a good staff that I know they've been working with you, so I appreciate that. So. What I'd like to do is just to do a quick rundown of the agenda, and then we'll begin. So the first one, BC 35.1, I'd just like to hold that just for a minute, if we can do that. We'll go on to BU 35.2, the 2022 rate supported budget, 2022 water and wastewater consumption rates, and service fees. I'm going to hold, Councillor Layton, I'm going to hold it anyway, because okay, so we'll hold that. BU 35.3, solid waste management services and recommended 2022 solid waste rates and fees. We'll hold that as well, I believe.
Yep.
Okay. BU 35.4, 2022 rate supported budgets for the Toronto Parking Authority. Does anybody want to hold that item? Councillor Layton will hold that?
Yeah, please.
No problem. BU 35.5, the capital variance report for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2021. Takers?
I hold that.
Oh, you want to hold that? Okay.
Yes, because I have some questions.
Okay. Next, we'll go to BU 35.6, the operating variance report for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2021.
I mean, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hold that too. Being new, I have some questions.
Absolutely, no problem
Thank
at all. Last item, BU 35.7, obligatory reserve funds, deferred revenues and reserves, and discretionary reserves funds as at September 30th, 2021.
I'll move the staff recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Layton's moved staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, here's the rundown. So why don't we go to the first item, which was the vice chair nomination. Are there any nominations for the vice chair of budget? Councillor Lai?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that Councillor McKelvey be appointed the vice chair.
Okay, now I recognize Councillor McKelvey did say she's going to be a little bit late today. I did speak with her, and I do know she would say yes to the nomination if she was here. So we could hold it down till she shows up, members, or if you want to proceed, she has given her support in the nomination. So, are there any other nominations? Guess I got to do it one more time for nominations. Seeing none, Councillor McKelvey has been nominated for vice chair of the budget committee. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Well, we'll welcome and congratulate her when she shows up in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so let's go on to BU 35.2, the 2022 rate supported budget for water. Are there questions of staff? Councillor Layton, I believe you had some questions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a couple questions, and I'll end on questions about stormwater capital funding. What is Toronto Water doing about microplastics in our water system, both residential and industrial users? Is this something that's factoring into our planning moving ahead?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So microplastics are typically found within consumer products. Variety of different soaps and shampoos, etc., use microplastics, and that is regulated at the federal level. So if you're going to change it from the source, it is a federal matter to change the product use. With respect to our role, we've looked at it from our treatment plant processes, and we do capture some of the microplastics, but some go through and continue.
Hi, this is the host. I apologize for the interruption, but I would suggest that Lou turn off his video as we're having some trouble getting consistent audio from you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's hard hearing you.
Okay.
Seems to be clear, yeah.
Better? Okay. So just again, I won't use up that much quickly. If it's a consumer product issue, which microplastics are, it's under federal government jurisdiction. With respect to treatment regulations, which is provincial jurisdiction, there have been no regulations made with respect to treating for microplastics.
So do we monitor them at all? Like, do we have any monitoring about what's coming in from the lake, what we're putting out into the lake?
No, there are no requirements to monitor specifically for that parameter. There are tests that are done by the various environment ministries, federal and provincial, and they have the jurisdiction to monitor that.
But would it be something that's treated on its way in to our water system?
So on the water treatment side, coming in, yes, our filtration systems will remove that component. On our wastewater side, we do get some partial removal of microplastics, but not full removal. So some doesn't end up in the local environment as well.
Thank you. I'll probably have something at council for you on that, but I don't now. The second one is around the status of the downspout. Right? And I saw Carlton here. The status of the downspout disconnection enforcement.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute there.
David, you're
Yes.
not on mute anymore. Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking for enforcement around permeable surfaces on private and public side, and of the downspout disconnection program, all part of the wet weather flow master plan. Could someone give me some advice or an update as to how much time is being spent enforcing those 2 or 3 elements?
So I'll jump in and talk about the downspout disconnection portion, of which Toronto Water has been involved in. With the permeable pavement, Toronto Water is not directly involved, so I can't answer that question. But with respect to our enforcement, we do provide information in the basement flooding updates, the briefing notes that we provide to each councillors on progress made in each ward. And we are surveying again the communities. We periodically survey our communities to estimate the number of downspouts that have been disconnected. And we had to postpone the survey because of COVID. We didn't want people out in the field. We do have to go out to the streets to look. So once we get that survey information, we'll be looking at whether we need to ratchet up enforcement efforts.
When was the last time you did that survey?
I think the last survey we did was in 2016, 2017. So we were planning to do it again in 2020, but we had to postpone it. And I was looking to see if we could get it completed this summer. I need to circle back to see if we were able to complete that survey.
And just with the indulgence of the chair, because I had about a minute and a half of Lou's first answer that I couldn't hear him, and I won't need a second round of questions. On the stormwater capital funding, are we fully funded for our stormwater capital fund?
For stormwater, yes, we're fully funded based on the schedules to complete our projects in the 10-year plan. If council wants to accelerate programs, then you would have to look at how do you accomplish that financing. We did report back in 2019. If we wanted to accelerate some components of our stormwater program, we would need additional funding from federal levels. And we have been soliciting that support from the federal government in order to accelerate the program.
Could I ask you, when that was all based on modeling for the wet weather flow master plan?
The component that we were looking for accelerated funding was one subset of the wet weather flow master plan, and in particular, dealing with the combined sewer overflows, the Inner Harbor, the Don River, and the Taylor Massey Creek tunnels with all the interconnections. So that was one of the key parts of the wet weather flow, but not the only part. We have many other components to the wet weather flow master plan.
So have we recasted with the expectations of storm events, major storm events being more frequent and probably with more intensity? Have we recasted what capital needs might be there, or might need to be there for the wet weather flow master plan?
In essence, you have, and that is the basement flooding program. Because the basement flooding program was a subset of the original wet weather flow master plan. Back in 2003, it was only a very small component. Council chose to make that a large component. So as I answered at the last meeting, the two have to be added together, basement flooding and the stormwater programs. If you add those two together, there's a substantial investment going into dealing with storms.
I'm sorry, Lou, maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. It has to do with, have we adjusted our stormwater infrastructure needs based on the changes as a result, the changes that are being brought by climate change?
All right. So if I understand you, based on a capacity point of view. So we've stuck with the 1 in 100 year storm level that council approved back when we expanded the basement flooding program. So our programs look at that enhanced service level. We're one of the few communities that actually look at it up to the 1 in 100 year storm level.
Thanks, Councillor Layton.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Lai, and then Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, does Toronto Water spend its allocated capital budget this year?
Yes, in fact, we're on a pace to be ahead of our target. Our target is usually 85%. We expect to be about 90% this year. So
Wow.
we'll be finished above that target.
So you're above that target. You find the money for that. Oh, 90%. You're right. Okay, 85%. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Congratulations for increasing that, because it's very important that we actually spend those. What about the industrial users? How do they qualify for the rebate?
So the industrial block 2 rate is what we refer to it as. You have to be a manufacturer in the city. So an industrial manufacturer, you're using processed water or product water. You have to use more than 5,000 cubic meters. That first 5,000 cubic meters of water is paid at the normal rate. Anything above that then gets a 30% discount. To qualify it, that's the key thing, is you have to be a manufacturer. You also have to then be compliant with our other bylaws, which are water efficiency bylaws, as well as with respect to our sewer use bylaws. So you need to remain compliant with those other programs, and if you do, you will get the 30% reduction.
Okay, it's 30%, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the difference between the two rates, the block 1 and the block 2, is a 30% reduction.
Thank you. Who are the 200 flat rate residential accounts?
So the flat rate accounts are the legacy properties where there were never any meters installed. They are spread throughout the city, but primarily in the old part of the city. The old part did not have meters in place. We cannot force our way into residential units. They're primarily residential units. And so council has put in place this legacy program where we would charge them this flat rate that represents consumption at what we call the 95 percentile. So our presumption was if you wouldn't let us in to put in the meter, you're using lots of water. So there's a higher charge for that.
So are we solving this problem, or what are we doing about it to make sure that they're going to have meters installed?
From a legal standpoint, there's not much we can do because we can't force our way into those homes. There's no legislation that allows us to enter a residential unit. And so that's what council adopted. Our recommendation was they would be charged at a higher rate. Now we track them, and if opportunities do present themselves, we have seen it slowly decreasing, but it's been pretty consistent and remaining about a couple hundred accounts, not changing over.
I see. For those seniors and disabled low-income water rebates, how do we promote them?
So we do promote them within the water bills periodically. We advise them that they're eligible for that. We also make sure that it's teamed up with other programs because we've synchronized the eligibility for those affordable programs with other affordability issues. So if you qualify maybe for property tax or other affordability exemptions, the water one matches exactly with it. So we use those other tools to promote it, and that's the typical fashion. And if you're eligible, you then receive the block 2 rate, so you get a 30% reduction on your water bill.
So my standard question is, are they in multiple languages? In some of the languages, what about people that don't speak English? Do they? How do they find out that they're going to be qualified?
Yes, all of our communications go out in multiple languages, and we work with our colleagues in strategic communication to push out that information in a variety of different languages.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to know where I find them. So would they be in the bill, or would they be on the website?
We can get you that information, and we'll send it directly to your office.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, actually, some of my questions really were touched on in the last two speakers. I can't find it. I'm trying to go back to the presentation now on a different page. Remind me what your recommendation was somewhere in the body of the text here on multi-year outlook. What increases we might anticipate in future years?
For the water rate, our outlook is forecasted in the model to be 3% each year going out for that 10-year period. And that is to generate the money needed for the $15 billion capital program that is in front of you today. If we do not carry on with the 3%, you will bottom out that reserve and go negative within 4 or 5 year time span. Right now, our model shows with the 3%, we do get very close to bottoming out that reserve in about 7 or 8 years. But we then rebound because we're going through a very expansive capital program over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. So there are some very, very large projects that will be using up a lot of that capital reserve.
Right. So, so the big question then becomes, because your budget, there are lots of things affected by inflation in just the materials that you need to complete capital projects. There's also a lot of consumables to do water treatment. So I think we looked at before, if we were just doing in the neighborhood of 3% increases in the future years, we'd sort of stay competitive with the rest of the GTA. But we really need that capital plan executed. Based on flooding, some neighborhoods are really waiting. And the question then becomes, if we're into a supply chain inflation out of control situation, do we have to make hard choices in the capital plan, or do we have to look at our multi-year rate increase program?
So in the presentation, I did highlight that concern as being a potential risk, particularly coming up with about $700 million worth of work that we need to tender in the near term, late this year and in 2022. We do have a lot under contract, over $2 billion under contract, where we do have some pricing that's been locked in. So that risk profile on the 700 million, and so 5% of 700 million is still a lot of money. And so how do we manage that increase? If all of them come in higher than our budget, yes, we could have a situation where we would need to come back to the budget committee and have a conversation about priority projects. And we might have to defer some certain projects while we proceed with other ones that are critical, and we would have to pay more. So I just raised that as a potential issue. Yeah. We're tracking it very closely.
Right. But with the amount of work you have already under contract and locked in, this can be a much later in the year sort of crisis point, if in fact it even is a crisis point. Would I be right?
So typically, timing, what we try to do with the new tenders, and that's particularly what we're concerned with, is the tenders that are going out pretty soon. There's some that will be going out later this year, and then we try to get our tenders out early in the new year so we can lock in the construction season. So we will be seeing these concerns, if they materialize, over the course of the next 3 to 5 months. And so as we're seeing the tender results, and if we are seeing some come above but some below, we will carry on as we have done in other years. We come back with reallocation reports to fund those projects that are above budget, but we can borrow from the ones we came under budget and or are delayed in a cash flow. Our concern is that if all of them keep coming in over budget, then we do not have opportunity as we had in other years.
And that's a pretty troubling trend. So you wouldn't just embed that in a capital variance report. That probably becomes an infrastructure and environment committee item. Am I right?
I would agree. Yes, we would have to go through there first, have a conversation with the members of infrastructure environment, because it is then about talking about priorities, and then coming to budget committee with the recommendations on reallocations.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Nunziata.
A question, Lou. If you remember that at council, when we spoke about the basement flooding, and we asked for a report back, and I think you're reporting back in first quarter 2022 as far as the rebate for some of the homeowners that have had basement flooding. Is that built into your budget?
So no, we would not have built that into the budget yet because council has not made a determination of whether we would carry on with the no fault. I was to bring back options at that time. And so we would consider how we finance it in that report.
Okay. Well, I was hoping it'd be in the budget. So I don't see Rockcliffe on this list of capital.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the funding for basement flooding projects, we typically do not list the specific areas of the city in the broad programs. We do have large buckets of funding for basement flooding projects. And then as a companion submission, we do give you the 5-year basement flooding briefing note that all councillors receive. And you see street by street what work is going to be constructed and where we are in preliminary design over a 5-year period. The Rockcliffe situation in particular, we are still coordinating the details of the basement floor for flooding area with the TRCA that's looking at changing the floodplain for Black Creek. And so the monies for that are programmed in our general basement flooding future accounts. So there's money allocated or earmarked for basement flooding. It's once we complete that EA and we know what projects are, that we start to name the specific streets and the specific projects. We're not at that point just yet.
I thought that the TRCA completed their environmental assessment because we've had a couple of public meetings on that. And actually, I'm waiting for the next one. I thought that was completed, their EA.
So from a process standpoint, they're very close to completing the EA, but technically they have not fully completed it. They have to put forward the final report, preferred options, and then allow for a 30-day comment period by the public if there are any objections. So we have not gone through the formal technical piece, but our teams are working closely with them to review their preferred solutions and how they impact any potential works that Toronto Water plan to do within that local community.
Okay, it's been 10 years. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none. Oh, by the way, I just want to welcome the new Vice Chair of the Board, Councillor McKelvey, or Budget, to the meeting. Okay, I'll go to speakers of the item. Councillor Layton, I believe you had a motion, if I'm not mistaken.
I just sent it to staff, so if Councillor Carroll wants to speak first, then I can come in after, if that's okay.
No problem.
Oh, okay. I don't have a motion, Mr. Chair, so I can go ahead if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, my questions about our multi-year approach to the rate increases. I ask because I think we do need to be concerned about what's happening in the economy and the ability to do capital work, to even procure the equipment. And I think we're really going to have to watch as it starts to impact us. Is it impacting the rest of the GTA? Because while we've had to introduce pretty consistent and always staying in line with inflation and sometimes a little above to catch up in water, we are still competitive with the rest of the GTA. I think the trick is going to be to watch how the impact is spread across the GTA, because they'll have the same challenges, certainly. So it's just that some of them, it's a little different because part of their water budget is actually in their property tax budget. So it's going to be tricky to watch, but I think that's the thing we're going to have to continue to ask water staff if they're tracking that as well, so that while we do the work we're doing, get the state of good repair and basement flooding work we know has to be done, we want to make sure that people understand not only is it necessary work, but you really are getting bang for your buck in our water budget in comparison to your neighbors. And so we'll have to add that question along with the reports that come back to us with news of changes within our own program. And if we're doing that in both Works Committee and Budget, I think we'll always have messaging that brings confidence to our residents. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Layton, I believe your motion is ready now.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You can have it up.
And this would be to request the General Manager, Toronto Water, as part of the report back on the potential for a stormwater management fee requested by City Council in 2023, to also report on the necessary stormwater capacity to address the expected severe stormwater events resulting from climate change in line with global best practice for modeling and managing stormwater. I'll get to that in just a very quick second, but would like to congratulate Lou on his budget and his work these past couple of years. I know most of us have, while we have questions, typically Lou has great and reasonable answers for them, which is why the budget saves some fiddling around stormwater and industrial water surcharge agreements. I would point both of which were recommendations from Lou that we then resolved in the end. There's very little change that is made to his budget, and partially, and this is from what Councillor Lai brought up, the magnificent spend rate and keeping on task that Toronto Water do. So thank you and congratulations. On this one particular motion, with the significant storm events in Vancouver and around the world, I think it behooves us to keep an eye on what the global best practices are for modeling stormwater, and with the expected changes as a result of climate change, and to ensure that we're managing it in the most appropriate way. And I'm not sure if a 1 in 100 year measure is still best practice, to be honest. I think that things have changed quite dramatically, and sadly, and the resulting cost increases. Like this is why people say climate change will cost money, because we're going to have more frequent once in a century storm events, and we should be prepared for them, because it was just a couple of years ago that that the subway flooded. It was just a couple of years before that the Gardner flooded. A couple of years before that the Don flooded, and these are major issues that we need to tackle going forward, because it's just going to become more frequent. So it's just a little report request to align with an existing report coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? I'll speak quickly. I too want to congratulate Lou and your entire team. Over the last year, as we are well aware, a lot of challenges across the entire city, and I think when you're looking at the importance of delivering the service that you do, Lou, to the residents and the businesses across the city, you have exemplified, I think, as Councillor Layton was, the work that you do. So I just want to congratulate your entire team. And yes, it's true that we, sometimes don't spend as much time on such a large budget. It seems to go through fairly quickly every year, but that doesn't suggest the importance of what you do. So I just wanted to thank you on that. And when you're looking at the 3% increase, again, a modest increase from my perspective, and it'll be happening over the next number of years. But all this is going into capital, which is critically important. And when you're looking at the capital budget, we are making historic investments in water across the city and water infrastructure. The $1.41 billion capital budget that we're going to be approving shortly is the largest budgeted capital investment in the city's history. When you look at the capital budget of $15.1 billion, again, the sort of historic increases in investment are very noticeable. When we're looking at $4.1 billion of stormwater management projects, again, indicates, and we've just had a bit of a discussion of, more needs to be done, but I think we're doing an incredible job, and especially on the spend rate. you upwards of 90%. This one, we're looking at some of the other spend rates in other divisions across the city. Pales to comparison with water is doing. And in fact, I think you set a very good standard, Lou, for the work that you've been doing that trying to do. So I want to thank you very much on all of that. And again, the work that the entire team across the city has been doing over the last year. Thank you. Councillor Nunziata, did you have?
I really want to speak, but I just want to.
Okay.
Just to make a comment to Lou. I know that councillors will probably get calls from constituents when their rate goes up. Every year they always do. So if you can give maybe the councillors a briefing note on the reason for the increase, so this way councillors can respond to their constituents. That's all I'm asking. It's not a motion, but just ask Lou to do that. I think he did that last year.
I think he'll undertake that, definitely. Thanks, Councillor. Any other speakers? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendations that have been moved? Opposed? We didn't. You know what? Did we vote on your amendment, Councillor Layton? I don't think we did. No, we didn't. So let's go back. Let's vote on Councillor Layton's amendment. Or briefing no request. Sorry, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, item as amended. All in favor?
Should we do recorded vote?
Recorded vote, please. Has been requested.
Okay. So this is a recorded vote on item as amended for item BU 35.2, the water rate budget. All in favor? Chair Crawford, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Layton, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Lai, Councillor McKelvey. That is unanimous.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Why don't we go to the next item, which is BU 35.3, Solid Waste Management Services and Recommended 2022 Solid Waste Rates and Fees. Let's begin with questions of staff. Councillor Carroll.
My questions are about the briefing notes that I ordered. They are wonderfully detailed, but I wrote the motions wrong, so I do not have the information I'm looking for. My questions at the last budget committee meeting, it's no one's fault but my own. There were many hands involved in the motion and ended up veering from the intent. My questions, though, at the meeting are about the service levels for collecting the solid waste in parks. So we now have a wonderful briefing note about diversion, and we have no targets for diversion in parks. It sounds like from the briefing note, we've kind of given up on trying to influence behaviors in parks to get people to sort. Is that true?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's generally correct. We still do some communications, but it's a challenge to source separate at parks.
Okay, so that would explain Councillor Layton's anecdote of seeing somebody just pick up the blue bin, put it in the residual bin, and then carry it away in one container. Then the other part of my motion, you ended up giving me a very detailed note about enforcement, but what I'm really focused on is the service level for actually emptying the bins at all. The service level has not changed for years, according to the overall service levels briefing note, and yet we get constant complaints about it. So I'm wondering, how is that service dispatched when we say anywhere from 1 day to 7 days? How does solid waste know when we actually need to change the response to a certain park on a regular basis? Because right now it seems sort of complaint basis. We have to phone and say it's full again in Park X.
So through the chair to the councillor, we look at our parks and open spaces individually. So when we look at our parkettes, generally they're collected 1 to 2 times a week. Destination parks 4 to 5 times a week, and then the high priority waterfront parks every single day. And throughout COVID, we have been adjusting our service levels at the larger parks, for sure, definitely down by the beaches. And a lot of it is driven by complaints, to be honest, for our increased service level. But the service level, if we were to outline every single park, every single parkette, it would be quite large. And then we get into the debates of, should a parquet have it 2 or 3 times a week? What we're able to do with that broader 1 to 7 is adjust it based on complaints, based on councillor feedback, and based on staff's assessment when they arrive at those parks. So we have the flexibility within our operations to address those challenges when they come up without being overly prescriptive of what a certain park should get. So we're able to deliver that.
Okay, I can go along with that, but how do you account for population growth? And how is the dollar amount impacted by that? We could say it's anywhere from once a day to once every 7 days forever. But if population is increasing, I always hate to use my own bailiwick type of examples, but Parkway Forest is my example. It's a tower block village in which the population has more than doubled in 10 years, and it seems like every Monday morning we have to call and say, please empty these bins. It seems to still be being treated like a neighborhood park. So if it's population growth that has caused me to need a different service level for that park, how does that affect the budget? Do we not, if we have enough of those parks, eventually have to say, okay, the service level may still be 1 to 7, but I need more dollars to deliver that?
So through the chair to the councillor, based on the assessments, if a park needs more collection, there's 2 ways we can do it. Either you service the park more frequently, or you add additional bins and service at the same frequency. So those are 2 tactics that we use. If we require more funding to deliver that service based on customer complaints, based on councillor issues, it would be added to the budget. We feel very comfortable within the budget that we presented that we can meet our service standards and address any of those issues that are brought up by councillors or residents if there is a challenge at a park to up our service level for specific parks.
Okay. It took me a while to get that out, Mr. Chair. I still wanted to ask questions about the 10-year increase plan. So I don't know if you want to do a second round, or I should just do it now.
Let's do a second round. Let's see
Okay.
anything else, and then I'll circle back to you, Councillor.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Layton? And then
Yes, thank you very much. Just really quickly on the education budget, in the briefing note, on page 2, it says education and enforcement 7 million, but then in the sorry, that's in the analyst notes. In the briefing note, the numbers add up to a lower number than that, to 5. Can you talk us through what? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find where the 5. I think it's if you add the MLS table 1 at 1.3 million. Sorry, there's 2 table 1s, it looks like. The table 1 on page 2, the total for education is 3.8, and the total for municipal licensing and standards enforcement is 1.
Okay.
I did. I took the GO train last week for the first time in a long time, and it was really eerie. It was empty. I got like a front row parking spot at the GO train station at 8:30 in the morning. That's never happened in my entire life, ever.
About 10 seconds, I think. Okay, Councilor McKelvey. You know what? Why don't we start, because we'll get back to Shelley after your questions, then, because she wanted to do a second off. Councilor Lai, you have questions too? Okay, so why don't we
Yeah,
start?
I was on my last two questions.
Oh, right, yes, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, Councilor. Yeah, I don't even know. Okay, well, I don't know what the time was either, so don't worry about it.
They'd be very quick. I think Matt has the answer to the second one is well,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but Matt will tell us.
Okay, I think we're back, so why don't we start?
So is it possible to break down the education budget for solid waste beyond sort of just listing the programs? Or is there any one big number that kind of dominates that amount?
So through the chair to the councillor, I can definitely provide a breakdown, but just a very high level. We have around $2 million set aside for our 10 to 15 campaigns, around 400,000 for printing, collection schedules, our utility bills, $500,000 for our roadmap for our stakeholder and community outreach group, and then there's some other research and other engagement activities, but I can definitely provide you an email breakdown of that.
Out of curiosity, what's the capital budget used for?
So some of that capital budget is used for the long-term solid waste management strategy and funding for the education related to that. And again, we can get you a complete breakdown of its costs, not a problem.
So my last question is, I have a motion that's being tabled. Could you explain what it is to the rest of the committee?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the council, last year in our 2021 budget, staff brought forward a recommendation to provide 3 First Nations communities that are close to our Green Lane landfill with a $100,000 grant program each in order to support the engineering work, community consultations, as we move forward with our renewable energy strategy at the landfill. And we've been negotiating and setting up a number of tables with the 3 First Nations communities this year. And just out of abundance of caution and make sure that the council fully understands this grant program is in our analyst notes last year. We indicated that we were looking to spend the $300,000 in 2021. And we just wanted to make sure that that was brought forward to council and committee to give us the authority to spend that over the duration of the project. So just wanted to make sure that we were being completely open and transparent with that as we move through this process.
Great. Councilor McKelvey, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to know if you could just briefly summarize what are the next steps for improving the diversion in parks. And thank you, Councillor Carroll, for asking for the briefing note, which answered my questions and neglected to get your own answer. Sorry about that. So how much more are we expanding this next year? Kind of what is the plan for the rollout of it? Because it sounds, like a significant improvement to just have the beverage only bins versus in the dog waste, et cetera. So where are we at with that, like expansion next year?
So through the chair to the councillor, right now we're just in the review phase of how well those particular pilot programs went, and also we're in the process of doing a waste composition study of the materials at the park, so we better understand what's left in each bin, and then, like you mentioned, with our 2 pilot programs on pet waste and blue bin beverage containers, we're looking to expand that this year. We don't have a full plan drawn out at this point in time because we're looking at what parks are best ready for that type of infrastructure. But we will update IEC throughout the year with the successes of that program for sure.
So in terms of cost for doing more of those parks, it's really just switching out the bins. Like, are there any other costs associated with this? And do our costs go down when our garbage is better sorted too? Like, is there any correlation with that?
So through the chair to the councillor, the costs would be just the switching out of bins and refabricating the tops of bins, which isn't too difficult or costly. So generally it's net zero. Sorry, I forget the other part of your question.
The actual cost of like the garbage pickup itself, like is diversion more costly for us? Like, is there savings to be had on that as well? On that side of it?
Yeah. So when we look at the diversion side, I'd have to go back and get a breakdown of the specific costs of recycling versus landfilling. But at the end of the day, moving towards that circular economy and moving materials where they should go from a broader triple bottom line perspective, it's better to divert that material. But cost comparison, they're fairly similar. Fairly
similar. So I guess the only limitation really for next year is just it's not so much a monetary constraint to do more. It's more just a people and a time constraint.
Through the chair, those are some of the constraints for sure, and making sure that the parks that we roll these out into have poor performance, right? So when we initiate these pilots, we see better performance at those areas.
Okay. Well, Thompson Park is the one that I saw with Councillor Thompson. So if you could do Councillor Thompson a solid and make sure that I get that one done, that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Lai next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a new member, I just wanted to have an idea of how much savings is it to get rid of those the annual calendar.
So through the chair to the councillor, it was a little over $500,000 a year.
$500,000 a year. Okay. And then you are spending, how much you're spending to do the public relations and education cost? How much is the budget? Is it 7 million, 5 million? I mean, I heard Councillor Layton asking that question.
Through the chair to the councillor, the education budget and outreach budget is $3.8 million.
Okay. So I'd like to have a copy of that when you're sending to Councillor Layton about the breakdown of the public relations education budget. Also, we have a lot of questions being asked by residents about, I'm sure some other councillors would have too. I assume that these budget, the public relations and education budget, and you're gonna prepare some briefing notes for us how to deal with people that are asking questions about the elimination of the calendar.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we've prepared a number of documents and met with, I believe, all councillors' offices, your staff, to provide them with that material for when this rolls out. So right now, residents are receiving in their utility bills the collection schedules, and by the end of this year, they'll also receive a waste reduction handbook with a lot of the messaging that would have normally been in a calendar, but in a much more condensed version.
A handbook, a physical handbook, or would it be available online?
It'll be both.
I assume that that some of these online ones would be in multiple languages, I hope.
We work very closely with Strategic Communications to ensure that the languages within the city are incorporated into all of our communications.
Okay, that's very good. And my last question would be about the mechanical leaf collection program. Can you tell me more about how this program works?
So through
It's costing $2.5 million a year, isn't it? Yeah.
Through the chair to the councillor, the mechanical leaf collection is a service provided by transportation. That's not provided by solid waste. So that's not within our budget.
I see. Okay. All right then. Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
You can save that question for January when we start the operating. Councillor Nunziata, and then we'll go to Councillor Carroll for second round.
Yeah, I just have one question on the environment days in your report.
Go ahead. You're on mute, Councillor.
Hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, on environment days, I'm just looking at the environment days and the number of environment days and how many people participated. But you got a line in here which I'm not sure. Some services offered at community environment days are also provided through curbside collection, such as electronic waste. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, a lot of the activities that are done at community environment days are supported almost every day of the week at solid waste. Whether it's drop off of hazardous waste at our transfer stations, that's provided during the E-Day events, or the collection of electronic waste, which is done curbside. We also have the ability to pick up household hazardous waste through our toxic taxi program individually at a residence or a customer's house. So a lot of the programs that are offered at E-Days are also spread out within our normal operation.
But is that advertised? Because I don't think all residents are aware of that. Like,
So
do people know?
Through the chair to
I didn't know. Yeah.
Councillor, we'll definitely add that to our education programming this year, for sure. Yeah. But it is fairly well communicated on the websites and those forums. But we will definitely take that under consideration for one of our campaigns this year.
Well, and maybe you can give a briefing note to the council so we can put in our e-news and that, because I don't know for other councils, but I wasn't aware of that until I read that in the report. Because when you get calls from constituents that they've missed Environment Day or they're disabled, they can't go to Environment Days, and what do? I had no idea. So it would be nice if we had that information so we can communicate that to our constituents and maybe part of your communication. So that was my only question. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Carroll, you had some more questions you wanted to ask?
I would just say somebody's telling them because we got in trouble with our police division for the traffic jam created around McNichol transfer station twice this year. Some of them are finding out about it. The only challenge we have there is that all of Markham is finding out about it as well. So thank you for providing all that service to Markham, Matt. My questions, I have one question that I'm adding as a result of the first round. I think there may be some people say, gee, is that all, when they see the motion for this thing that we're going to do for the First Nations bands at Green Lane now. Is it in our education what we've done for them since the beginning of purchasing Green Lane landfill? Because our support for those communities really dates back to that time, doesn't it?
Through the chair to the councillor, absolutely. We have a number of commitments, not just within the certificate of approval, but also being a neighbor that we need to make sure that we uphold. We have community benefits agreements with a number of the First Nations communities close to the landfill. And what this program is doing is, we know that the process of consultation is very. It's much better when you start the process with communities versus sharing the information once you're done. And so what the division has done is we've set up a table with the 3 First Nations communities, their environment groups, and are really walking through the potential options of renewable energy at Green Lane. So we're working with them from the very start to get their advice and feedback, and working through the whole process with the three communities, and also looking at spin-off benefits that renewable energy can have at the landfill for the communities close to our infrastructure.
Right. Excellent. So my main question, the reason I wanted to come back is I wanted to spend some time on this budget recommends a 10-year increase program. And I'm wondering if you can break out, it's because we have a pretty energetic capital program, but a lot of that is just, am I right? And a lot of that is really just accumulating the reserve we're going to need for the long-term waste strategy for when Green Lane reaches end of life. That's a pretty significant need, and that's why you're recommending this program?
Through the chair to the councillor, the 3% forecasted rate increase over the 10-year planning horizon is for a number of factors. One, it's to allow us to maintain our existing infrastructure. We have 7 transfer stations, and they've been around for a while, so they definitely need to be maintained very well. We have a landfill development program, so Green Lane, we need the capital funding to keep building our landfill cells. And also, when we're looking at the growth program or growth profile within solid waste, looking at the 3rd anaerobic digestion facility, renewable energy. So that rate increase will help fund that capital program. It will also provide capacity within the reserve to fund the next landfill, or to fund other programs outside of that 10-year window as well that we know are fast coming down the pipe.
Yeah. So when we go to do education programs, I don't always see that overview being pushed out into the community, because I think over time everyone became an expert in solid waste coming out of the Adams mine debate, and people could tell you how much we were spending per ton to get to Michigan. And when all of that was done, they sort of stopped looking at it, and they're just sort of focused on their bin rate. But I'm wondering if our education materials over time, if we're going to have 3% a year every year for 10 years, and the cost is going up, the property tax rebate part is gone now, so it's really just going to be a pure increase. If part of our education materials is, why does garbage cost what it costs writ large, so they really start to understand the many pressures that we face every day, and that there is always the looming pressure, because you find a place for your residual waste, and no matter what you find, it's got a shelf life, and you'll need something 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road. The big view, I don't see that in education. Is that in the plan? Is that something that's rolling out now as a result of the long-term waste strategy group?
So through the chair to the councillor, we will be refreshing the long-term solid waste management strategy. There was a commitment to refresh it every 5 years, and we're starting that process now. So we can definitely take that under consideration on our communications, so that residents know that it's more than just a collection of the material that needs to be funded. It's a full system, and really wrap that into the overall process and our message.
Because you would agree, I wonder if there's been any conversations. We went through a period where we had to raise our water bill 9% a year, every year for 9 years. And what was a shock to me was that beyond the first 3 years, people just sort of took it on the chin. They understood it. And a lot of it was pushing out how far we've gotten behind in water, what measures we have to meet, and why we all have to pitch in for that. Has there been any conversation with any of those folks to sort of learn from that?
So through the chair to the councillor, honestly, no, there hasn't been communications on a 9% and those impacts on the residents and how to communicate that. We are projecting a 3% increase, which aligns with inflation, which generally will support the overall program for the next 10 years. But I get your point on making sure that we definitely communicate why we need 3%, more so than just collecting the materials, that it's a broader perspective. And we can definitely look at messaging that out.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions at all? Seeing none, why don't we go to speakers? I know Councillor Layton, you have to move your Your motion?
Yes, thank you very much. I do have a motion. This comes from General Manager of Solid Waste Management. City Council extend the existing authority of the General Manager of Solid Waste Management Services to continue to administer First Nations Engagement Grant Fund for the Green Lane Landfill Renewable Energy Study Project, funded through the capital program for qualifying local First Nations to retain on a verified basis technical services such as energy, environmental, and or similar consultants to assist with the engagement process over the term of the study, and to negotiate and enter into necessary agreements from this fund on terms and conditions acceptable to the General Manager of Solid Waste Management Services and in the form satisfactory to the city solicitor. Just a couple pieces to recap. I'm very pleased to see that our third organics processing site continues to be accelerated. This is something that years ago we had, it was actually up for debate, and it didn't seem possible, but slowly over time, the general manager has been able to advance it faster, and I think the realization that we need to proceed in this direction, and it's very heartening to see that this is moving forward a little bit quicker than it was anticipated several years ago. I'm surprised people don't know about the toxic taxi. I use it all the time. I had 12 half-full paint cans picked up just, I think, 6 weeks ago when I was cleaning out part of the garage. And like, the reality is, it's a great service. We should encourage it more. It's taking toxics likely out of our water system. Maybe Lou should kick in a couple bucks from his budget too. No, maybe not. But it's a good service, and to be honest, solid waste management have several good services that we need to promote more in order to divert more. That's why I had a bunch of questions about the educational budget, because I think one of the things standing in the way of us reaching our diversion targets is education, and it's going to become more complicated as the provincial EPR system rolls out, because they've determined that it's going to be more complicated, unfortunately, and they've allowed industry to take over a lot of the direction that's being that'll result in how services are run in the city. I would just also like to add that solid waste management continue on what I think is a very aggressive stance around other environmental impacts of their operations, one being the renewable natural gas project that they have undertaken. If you don't know about it, that one, you should definitely get plugged in more, because they're capturing this natural gas from our digesters of the organics and putting it into their trucks, which is pretty cool. It's not a long-term solution for climate change, but it's a good intermediary step. They're going to try to do the same from our landfills. Like, this is landfill gas that's currently escaping or being burned, escaping into the atmosphere, being burned, and none of that energy is captured, but it's going to happen for decades to come. And they're talking to the communities around the landfill about what they can do with the gas, and not only capture it and burn it for heat or something like that, but some of the discussions are around integrating it into greenhouse settings, where the energy has a co-benefit because of the heat that's generated from the combustion, as well as some of the other byproducts. And so we end up in a situation where we can help communities gain more food independence. We can help communities build their economic activity as they help the City of Toronto manage our waste. That's a really, really beautiful situation for something as ugly as a landfill. So I think we should continually support that efforts. And if you don't hang out with Carlisle on a regular basis, you really should. He's an incredibly passionate senior staff member at Solid Waste Management, and anytime you talk to him, he's so passionate about his projects. It fills your heart and your mind. And I do it just for my own mental health, and just because it's heartening to see someone so dedicated and passionate to his work on great, cool, fun ideas. Thank you very much, Carlisle and Matt.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Lai, then Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to quickly speak on thanking the solid waste management team and on doing a good job, really. Your team of staff with the environmental days, they're really very helpful and they are very, very dedicated, as I can see, to fill the councillor's request. I mean, I have done a few requests about the compost, because during the pandemic, people wanted to have more compost, and then the second E-Day, we have more compost. And it's very, very good that you're listening to our constituents and the councillor's office. And I just wanted to say that education is very important. And I'm very happy to hear that we're educating in different languages, because there's a lot of people out there that English may not be their first language, and they need to be educated as well and communicated. And actually, it's everybody's job to make sure that we save the environment. And I'm actually doing some. I will probably reach out to your office. I'm doing some outreaching in how to do recycling in condo buildings. So there's a need for not only parks and everywhere. I think if everybody do a good job, and then we'll all be there and save the environment and making sure that we have a safe environment for our next generation. So I just wanted to quickly, all in all, wanted to thank solid waste management staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carroll next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to follow on the advice that Councillor Nunziata was giving, that we need to know more about the transfer station Environment Day program. I think what may need to be added, it seems like everyone's finding out about it in my area, because we really did create a bad traffic jam both times. Took a lot of paid duty to make it work. But I think what's happening, because I've been the only councillor standing there at mine, even though they were actually offered 2-3 wards. I think that what's maybe missing from solid waste management is making it clear as they send the information to councillors' offices. I hope you know the councillor is invited to be here, because I go set up my event tent and end up having a wonderful time talking to residents, and I'm the only one there. And I don't think it's clear to councillors that they will be accommodated to do that if they become a part of that event. So that might be a good idea, because again, we end up standing there doing solid waste education. People get out and talk about it, and we're able to drop ideas into their mind about why we do our best to scoop this stuff up and to deal with it in the proper way. A lot of what we do as councillors is educating, and so use us. We're helpful in that regard. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is that I think we really need to ramp up education, because while 3% here doesn't seem like that much, there is a sort of a wall that you hit about the third year in, where people say, "Why is this happening? Why do I have to do this every year?" Because they don't equate this particular service with inflation. They don't really understand what's happening. Why is, apart from the price of fuel, why do I have to pay more for this bin every year? And because we attach the fee to the black bin, I think it escapes people sometimes that they're getting everything else that happens in solid waste management services as part of that cost. And that there is this looming pressure for us at the end of it. I say this every year. Annette will say, "Oh, there she goes again." Vancouver has done a global success story, a good version of this, such that people really understand the pressure that solid waste management puts on a large and growing municipality. They really understand what's happening, and that there are next steps coming, such that they support every business that brands itself as being part of complying with every solid waste initiative that comes out there. Zero waste, circular economy are not foreign terms to almost anyone in that city as a result of the way they push education out, up to and including the annual banner event. The whole point of their annual Zero Waste Conference is just that it creates 3 days of media where the media starts writing stories about garbage. We need to get that aggressive in our education campaign, because we're now into the multi-year increases to accommodate what's coming down the pipe at the end of the long-term waste strategy, and a big decision that the community will have to make, and they need to be educated to help us make that decision. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Nunziata.
The question that I asked the staff about that services offered at community environment days are also provided through curbside collection, such as electronic waste. If the staff can give us, the councillors, a briefing note on that, and we can put it in our newsletter and our e-news, it would, I would greatly. I don't think I need to move a motion on that, but I think it's important that the councillors get a briefing note on that and what they can collect and what days as well.
Great, thank you. Any other speakers? Gail, and I too want to thank you on behalf of all of us for the work you've been doing over the last year. It's been a challenging year, as I've already mentioned, but you seem to have come out of it amazingly so. Just on the service levels, we have all, me included, contacted your office and our staffs numerous times, and you're incredibly responsive to all the needs that we have across the city. So I just want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, and really thank you also too for the fact that we have this 3% rate, and recognizing that we're looking at the longer term, but you've been able to, with the 3%, have a state of good repair that is really non-existent with your $840 million capital plan. So I want to thank you on that. Also too, I just want to mention the environment days. I'm glad the environment days are actually coming back to communities. And as much as the transfer stations were important, again, my community was quite a distance from my local transfer station. And Councillor, I actually did go out on the day that my environment day was there. But I was there with Councillor Lai, and I think 99% of the people there were from her ward. We were having great conversations, but I didn't have that opportunity to have it with my community. So I'm actually looking forward to it. I think the community is looking forward to having the environment days back in the communities, because I think they've been very, very successful. And anyway, just wanted to again just thank you for the incredible work that you've been doing on solid waste management over the last year. Okay, we have Councillor Layton's motion. We can have that up, or if we would just want to. Okay, we don't need it up. All in favor of Councillor Layton's motion? There it is. Opposed? That's carried. And item as amended. Recommendations for the solid waste budget as amended.
Recorded vote.
Recorded vote, please.
And this is all in favor of item as amended, BU 35.3. Chair Crawford, Speaker Nunziata, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Lai, Councillor Layton, Councillor McKelvey. Mr. Chair, that's unanimous.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for all the staff for the work. Next, we'll go to BU 35.4, the 2022 rate-supported budgets, Toronto Parking Authority. Councillor Lai, I believe you requested that to be held. You had some questions?
Just have a couple of quick questions, Mr. Chair, on this one here. Now that I'm off the TPA board, I just wanted to know, where is the usage at this point now? Have we seen any increase in the parking revenues over the last several months, or are we optimistic? That's my question.
Mr. Chair, the speaker appears to be muted.
Yes, my apologies. Good morning, everybody. Regarding the question, the top line revenue over the last, I'd say the last 4 months has improved, consistent with the reopening of the city and the province. So currently we're running about a 70 index versus pre-pandemic levels, or 2019, so around 72%, but still down, about 25 to 30% versus 2019. We're forecasting that trend to continue a balance of year. And it's remarkable, actually, because it's been moving through the 68 to 72% index consistently. So we will expect it to complete balance of year. That has translated through improving financials through 2021, and we've used that as our essentially our forecast for our top line performance through 2022. So certainly significantly better than 2021 and 2020, but not all the way back to pre-pandemic levels in 2022.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, speakers to the item. Why don't I speak quickly? Scott, again, I want to thank you, of course, in a challenging year, as it has been for everybody. I know you haven't been here that long, but I think you've taken the helm quite well with the Toronto Parking Authority. And I think as challenging as it was this last year, I think out of your budget and what I've been seeing in the conversations we've had is that it is a brighter future for Toronto Parking Authority. It's good to know that we're going to be returning to a profit next year. We're not where we were, but at least you've worked it in such a way that we're looking at having at least a profitable year. I think that's good, considering the unknowns of what may be happening with the downtown coming back and all that. So I just want to thank you for that. And of course, the keeping the parking rate freeze needs to be done, of course, just because there's a lot of unknowns about the customers coming back. And I guess also in your budget too, thanking you. What is really good to hear is about the desire and how you're wanting to build a greener city. In this budget, we have an expansion of the bike share. I had some great conversations about the expansion out in my ward, out in Scarborough, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And as well, the partnership with the Natural Resources Canada and Toronto Hydro on the multi-year EV charging strategy. I think that engaged a number of us in the presentation last week, and again, looking forward to that work that you're going to be doing. So, and again, thank you for a good year. We'll have much better as we move along into the future, but looking forward to working closely with you and your entire team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to do a all in favor of the recommendations. Parking authority, great. Opposed? That carries. Great, thank you. Next, we go on to BU 35.5, the capital variance report for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2021. I think Councillor Lai, you also held that down.
Chair, I just have a couple of questions as well. I just wanted to understand a little bit better what happens to the unspent money in the capital budget. Does it get carried forward to the next year?
Through you, Chair. Councillor, yes. In most instances, the money is carried forward into the next year as the projects are likely still ongoing. For any unspent money on capital projects that are closed out, that money goes back and gets reinvested in the capital plan.
So that is what the cities usually do for the underspent capital budget, I suppose, right? It will go back.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Typically, the unspent money is directly correlated to the status of the project. So if the project is ongoing, those funds would be needed to be carried over into a subsequent period.
Yeah. I just have a local question about my park, the Milliken Park. There's a pond restoration there, and I'm happy to see that there's allocation for the money for that one. So this is I assume this will be in the next year's parks budget, capital budget, to complete the restoration of the pond.
Through the chair, thanks for the question, Councillor Lai. I think we have some capital stuff on the line, but we may need to go into the details of the budget line by line to get you an answer to that question. So if it's okay, we can, unless Anne-Marie has a quick answer on that one. I see Anne-Marie.
Well, I'm happy with if you just take it offline with me. Okay, Jenny?
We'll
thank
take
you
it
so
offline
much.
And we'll connect with your office directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. First of all, just a follow-up question, just so the knowledge is out there in the public meeting. The other thing that I think people should know about unspent capital, maybe you just want to explain sort of in layperson's terms, when we adopt the capital budget and some of it is funded from debt, we also sort of manage that. If a project's ready to go, then it's part of the next borrowing and you're able to fund it. But we don't necessarily, the day after council adopts the capital budget, we don't borrow all of the money and then end up holding money we didn't spend, right? We pace the debt along with the projects.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, thank you. So I will try and explain it in this very simple way.
Yeah.
The way the city actually tackles its capital plan is that we actually fund our projects through our working capital, meaning our cash, and we actually replenish that cash once projects are completed. So you're correct. We do not go out and finance or pre-finance any capital projects.
Right. And then I was just looking at that we're doing another scoop through and close some projects, but it's interesting because you've provided us this time with a projects to be closed and also partial closed. Is that partial closed table? Is that showing us what you're tracking? Because that one was interesting to me. The fully closed projects, it never makes the news that we often come in under expenditure on a capital budget by carefully monitoring, and so you have some money to put back into the reserve here. But the partial closed table is interesting to me. Is that, looking at the various years and then showing us what's left to be spent, or is that trying to have those come in under expended as well?
So I can start and then I can ask Steve Conforti to jump in. But in some instances, there are sub-projects of larger projects. And so components of the larger projects are closed out as different milestones are achieved. So I'll let Steve elaborate if he'd like to provide any additional insight.
Through the chair, our CFO explained it well. It's essentially there are subcomponents of those projects that we're able to close out while we retain project costs for the remainder work that has to be completed.
Okay, so even if one contractor is doing a number of projects within a bundle of projects, we make him account for, okay, this one's done, and he accounts for it. We don't just let him carry on spending whatever the overage is. We're tracking how much did it cost you to do Etobicoke Creek trail improvements is an example I'm staring at right now. Okay, we're done. And so we're now tracking the rest of the money. It's kind of contract management, isn't it?
Yeah, and through the chair, there's a capital project will be approved at a certain level, and then there's subcomponents that are managed at each of those subcomponent levels.
Well, it's a level of scrutiny that it looks enhanced over what we've been doing in the past. So bravo. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, any speakers to the item? Not. Councillor Carroll, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I did want to go in, target divisions specifically and then sort of point the finger at them. But I found it very interesting just doing a quick run through ability to spend. Some are obvious to me. Oh, they're very COVID impacted. They probably were redeploying or unable to really turn their minds to carefully getting this project out the door or that project. And then others where it seems like they should have been able to get more work done. Well, things were locked down. And so I think that I'll leave it in this 9-month variance report, but I'm actually going to go through and circle them and ask about that when we're doing, as budget committee members, our informal reviews. I think we've really got to get at that. If you didn't have an ability to spend last year when people were staying home and out of your way, tell me more. What stopped you from getting this done? Because we have a few divisions that are back down in the 30s and 40s percent, and well, long-term care, I think it's obvious to all of us what would have stopped them over the last couple of years, but at 25% of ability to spend. I think it's important to focus in on that because the city has been through that before, where the ability to spend sort of collapsed when we were going through difficult economic times. And what can happen is a division then sort of loses the capacity to gear back up. And work has to be done to make sure they have the right positions in place to get back up to where they're really chipping away at state of good repair. And they're, if we have a vision for something to happen in that division, that they're able to execute it. And so I think that's going to have to be one of our tougher sets of questions when we're doing our informal reviews that start next week. Thanks. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, any other questions? Seeing none, speakers to the item? Well, Councilor Kerr did speak, of course, so I'll move the recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next, BU 35.6, the operating variance report for 9 months ending September 30th, 2021. Councillor Lai, you also had questions, I believe?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think my question's been answered and I'd like to release the item, please.
Okay, any other speakers to the item? Seeing none, I'll move recommendations then for the operating variance, BU 35.6. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I think we are done because we finished BU 35.7 and that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks all the staff. That's the rate-based portion of the city budget is now complete. It'll be going off to executive, of course, and then full council after that. Right into the operating new year. So, again, thank all the staff for the 3 areas that we've been focused on this last couple of weeks, and appreciate all the work and effort you've done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Mr. Staff.